I've been married to Sarah for 25 years. We live in a comfortable suburb just outside Boston, where the lawns are always manicured and the neighbors pretend not to gossip. I'm a lawyer. She's a successful real estate agent, and we've built what most would call the American dream. Our kids are off to college now, leaving us with an empty nest and apparently too much time to think. That's probably why Sarah hit me with those words that make every husband's blood run cold. Jack, we need to talk. It was a quiet Sunday evening, and I was watching the Red Sox game, thinking about nothing in particular. Sarah sat down next to me, wearing that expression I'd learned to recognize over the years, the one that meant trouble was brewing. I've been thinking, she continued, and my stomach dropped even further. In my experience, when your wife says she's been thinking, it's never about how to make your life easier. I muted the TV, knowing whatever was coming required my full attention. Rachel says we're stuck in a rut, she began, referencing her best friend, a woman who'd been through 3 divorces and was currently shopping for husband number 4. Rachel Davis, the wild card of our social circle, living on 5 acres near the country club, courtesy of her generous divorce settlements. And what exactly does Rachel think we should do about that? I asked, already dreading the answer. Sarah shifted uncomfortably on the couch. Well, she thinks we should explore other relationships. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that never came. You want us to see other people? I finally managed to say, not exactly, she rushed to explain. Just experience new things. We've been together so long, Jack. Don't you ever wonder what else is out there? I didn't actually. I was perfectly content with our life together. You're the only man I've ever been with, she continued. And while that's special, sometimes I wonder if I missed out on something. The baseball game continued silently on the screen, but I couldn't have cared less about the score anymore. So what exactly are you suggesting? I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. Maybe we could open up our marriage a bit, just temporarily. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. And this is Rachel's idea? Sarah nodded, then quickly added, but I've been thinking about it too. We're both still young, relatively speaking. The kids are gone. Maybe this is our chance to explore. I stood up, needing to move, to think. Let me get this straight. You want permission to sleep with other men? It wouldn't just be me, she protested. You could see other women too. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. And you think that makes it better? She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I love you, Jack. That won't change. But don't you think we've gotten comfortable? Maybe too comfortable. I walked to the window, staring out at our perfectly maintained lawn. I need time to think about this, I said finally. She seemed relieved that I hadn't immediately shot down the idea. The next morning, I went straight to my law partner's office. Mike Anderson had been my friend for 20 years, and I trusted his judgment. When I told him what Sarah had proposed, he leaned back in his chair and whistled low. That's unexpected, he said diplomatically. I need your help, I told him. If we're going to do this, I want it in writing, something that protects both of us. Mike raised an eyebrow. You're actually considering it? I shrugged. If I say no, she might do it anyway. At least this way, there are rules. He nodded slowly, understanding my logic. Give me a day, he said. I'll draw something up. The contract Mike created was a masterpiece of legal protection. It outlined clear boundaries, expectations, and consequences. Most importantly, it included a 48-hour cooling-off period between partners. When I showed it to Sarah, she seemed surprised by my acceptance. You're really okay with this? She asked. If this is what you want, I replied, let's do it properly. We both signed the contract that evening. Sarah immediately started planning her Friday nights with Rachel. I pretended not to notice the new clothes she bought, or the extra time she spent getting ready. The first week was hell. I stayed home, imagining her with other men, driving myself crazy with possibilities. But then something unexpected happened. Rachel showed up at my office one afternoon, looking stunning in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "I heard about your arrangement," she said, perching on the edge of my desk. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly very aware of her presence. "And?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "And I think Sarah's an idiot," she said bluntly. Before I could respond, she leaned forward, her perfume filling my senses. I've always wondered what it would be like to be with you, Jack." I felt my heart rate increase. "That wouldn't be very ethical, Rachel. You're Sarah's best friend." She laughed, a rich, throaty sound. "Ethics? Your wife just gave you permission to sleep with other women." I'd say ethics went out the window. She had a point. That night, I took Rachel to dinner at an expensive restaurant across town. She was fascinating company, witty, intelligent, and completely different from Sarah. When she invited me back to her place, I hesitated only briefly. The next morning, I woke up in Rachel's bed feeling strangely liberated. Sarah was out when I got home, probably with one of her new friends. I found I didn't care as much as I thought I would. The following week, a new client came to the office. She was gorgeous, with olive skin and dark eyes that seemed to look right through me. She was seeking advice about a potentially cheating husband. As I gave her my professional opinion, I couldn't help but notice how she leaned forward, hanging on every word. When she suggested dinner to discuss her case further, I accepted. One dinner led to another, and soon she was a regular visitor to my office. Sarah noticed the changes in me. I was more confident, more relaxed. She started asking questions about where I spent my time. I gave her vague answers, just as she did when I asked about her evenings out. But I could see the worry in her eyes. This wasn't going according to her plan. She had expected me to stay home, pining for her while she explored her options. Instead, I was thriving. Women seemed to find me more attractive now that I was technically unavailable. The power dynamic had shifted, and Sarah didn't know how to handle it. One evening, she tried to initiate intimacy, but I reminded her of the 48-hour rule. "But I'm your wife," she protested. "The contract doesn't make exceptions," I replied calmly. I could see the frustration in her eyes. This wasn't the game she thought she'd be playing. She had wanted freedom while keeping me on a short leash. Instead, she'd given me wings, and I was soaring. Mike watched all this with barely concealed amusement. He said one day over lunch, "This isn't how these things usually go." I raised an eyebrow. "No. Usually, the wife suggests opening the marriage because she's already got someone lined up. The husband agrees because he's afraid of losing her. Then she has her fun while he sits at home watching TV." I smiled. "Is that what Sarah expected?" "Probably," he admitted. "But you've turned the tables on her." He wasn't wrong. Sarah had started spending more nights at home. Meanwhile, my social calendar was fuller than it had been in years. Rachel introduced me to her friends, all wealthy divorcees looking for attention. My new client invited me to exclusive parties. I was living a life I never knew I wanted, but something was missing. Despite the excitement, the new experiences, the attention from beautiful women, I found myself thinking about Sarah, about our history together, our shared memories, about the life we'd built. One night, I came home late from a dinner party to find her waiting up. She looked tired, vulnerable. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. And so began the next chapter of our story. Sarah sat in our dimly lit living room, looking smaller than I remembered. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. I took my time hanging up my coat, letting her words hang in the air. "Which part?" I asked, finally turning to face her. She flinched at my tone, and I felt a twinge of satisfaction. "All of it," she whispered. "This isn't what I wanted." I sat down across from her, maintaining my distance. "What did you want, Sarah?" She struggled to find the words. I thought I was missing something, that there was this whole world of experiences passing me by." I waited, letting her continue. "Rachel made it sound so exciting. All these adventures, these new experiences. Of course, it was Rachel. It always came back to Rachel. And how's that working out for you? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She looked down at her hands. It's horrible. That wasn't what I expected to hear. Every man I meet, they all compare themselves to you, she continued. Now that was interesting. They try so hard to impress me, to prove they're better than my husband. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. But they're not. None of them are. I leaned back, processing her words. Meanwhile, she continued, I hear about you everywhere I go. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, Rachel can't stop talking about how amazing you are. Her friends are all wondering why I would ever let you go. I couldn't help but smile at that. Even my new friends, they all ask about you. They want to know if you're really as good as everyone says. And what do you tell them? I asked, genuinely curious. I tell them they have no idea, she said softly. The silence stretched between us. I want to end this, she finally said. The arrangement? She nodded. I want things back the way they were. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the night. That's not possible, I said quietly. I heard her sharp intake of breath. What do you mean? I turned to face her. We can't go back, Sarah. Too much has changed. She started to cry in earnest now. Are you leaving me? Have you found someone else? I walked over and sat beside her, close but not touching. No, I'm not leaving you. And no, I haven't found someone else. She looked at me, confusion clear on her face. Then what? We can't go back, I repeated, but we can go forward, different than before. Hope flickered in her eyes. What are you saying? I pulled out a new contract from my briefcase. Mike drew this up for me today. She took it with trembling hands. What is it? Our future, I said simply. If you want it. She started reading, her eyes widening. The new contract was simple but firm. Complete fidelity from both parties. No more exploring or experiencing new things with other people. Any breach would result in immediate divorce, with clear financial consequences. You're serious about this, she said, looking up from the papers. Completely. She reached for a pen, but I stopped her. Before you sign, you need to understand something. She waited, pen hovering over the paper. If we do this, things will be different. I'm not the same man I was before. She nodded slowly. I've changed too, she admitted. I know, and that's why we need new rules. I explained my terms. No more girls' nights out with Rachel. No more private meetings with male clients. Complete transparency about our schedules and whereabouts. She listened without interrupting. And what about you? She finally asked. The same rules apply to me, I assured her. She looked relieved, but there was still uncertainty in her eyes. What about intimacy? I smiled. That's changing too. I explained my expectations. No more scheduled encounters. No more routine. Spontaneity and passion would be our new normal. She blushed, but I could see the interest in her eyes. And if I agree to all this, then we start fresh. Today. She signed without hesitation. I took the contract and added my signature below hers. What now? She asked softly. I stood up and held out my hand. Now we go upstairs and begin our new life together. She took my hand, but I didn't move. One more thing, I said. She looked up at me questioningly. I love you, Sarah. That never changed. Tears filled her eyes again, but these were different. I love you too, Jack. I'm so sorry I almost ruined everything. I pulled her close. You didn't ruin anything. You just helped us find a better way. That night was different from any we'd shared before. There was an intensity, a desperation in our lovemaking that had been missing for years. We were rediscovering each other, learning new ways to connect. The next morning, Sarah called Rachel. I could only hear one side of the conversation, but it was enough. She was ending their friendship. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. Rachel had been a toxic influence, always pushing for more excitement, more drama. We needed stability now, not chaos. When Sarah hung up, she was crying again. I held her, letting her grieve the loss of her oldest friendship. It had to be done, she whispered. I nodded, knowing she was right. Over the next few weeks, we established our new normal. I closed my social media accounts. Sarah changed her phone number. We both focused on rebuilding what we'd almost lost. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes I caught Sarah looking wistful when she heard about Rachel's latest adventures. Sometimes I missed the attention from other women, the thrill of the chase. But what we were building was better, stronger, more real. We started dating again, properly this time. I took her to new restaurants, concert shows. She surprised me with weekend getaways and romantic gestures. We were courting each other all over again. And every night, when we came home together, we remembered why we'd chosen each other in the first place. The passion that had been dormant for so long was now fully awake. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. Every room in our house held new memories. Every surface had a story. Our neighbors probably thought we were crazy. We didn't care. Mike noticed a change in me at work. You seem different, he observed one day. I just smiled. He didn't need to know the details. But he was right. I was different. We both were. Our brief experiment with opening our marriage had taught us valuable lessons. About trust. About commitment. About what really matters in a relationship. Sarah, I had almost lost everything. Instead, we found something better. Something stronger. Something real. And neither of us was willing to risk that again. 1 year later, Sarah and I were sitting on our back porch, watching the sunset. She was curled up against me, her head on my shoulder. Do you ever think about that time? She asked quietly. I knew exactly what she meant. Sometimes, I admitted, but not in the way you might think. She shifted to look at me. What do you mean? I took a moment to gather my thoughts. I think about how close we came to losing everything. She squeezed my hand, and how that loss made us stronger. I continued. Rachel had moved on to husband number 4. We'd heard through mutual friends that she was already eyeing number 5. Some people never learn, but we had. The lessons from our brief experiment had changed us fundamentally. Sarah had blossomed in unexpected ways. No longer seeking validation from others, she'd found her own confidence. Her real estate business was thriving. She'd become known for her integrity as much as her sales record. As for me, I discovered sides of myself I never knew existed. The experience had awakened something in me. Not a desire for other women, but a deeper understanding of what I wanted from life. From love. From marriage. Mike still teased me occasionally about those wild few weeks. Remember when you had half the divorcees in Boston chasing you? He'd say. I'd just smile and change the subject. Those memories belonged to a different man. A man I'd left behind. Sarah and I had developed new traditions. Every Friday night was date night. No exceptions. No excuses. Sometimes we'd dress up and go somewhere fancy. Other times we'd order takeout and dance in our kitchen. The important part was that we were together. Present. Engaged. In love. We'd also started traveling more. Weekend trips to places we'd always talked about, but never visited. Long drives where we'd talk about everything and nothing. Making new memories to replace the ones we'd rather forget. Our kids noticed the change in us when they came home for holidays. You guys seem different, our daughter observed during Thanksgiving. Good different, our son added, watching us slow dance in the kitchen. They were right. We were different. Better. Stronger. More in love than ever. One evening, Sarah found the old contract in my office drawer. Should we burn it? She asked. I thought about it for a moment. No, I decided. Let's keep it. She looked surprised. Why? As a reminder, I explained, of what we almost lost and what we found instead. She understood. That contract represented our lowest point, but it also marked the beginning of our resurrection. our rebirth as a couple. Sometimes, late at night, Sarah would still apologize. I can't believe I almost threw this away, she'd whisper. I'd hold her closer. We both needed to learn. I'd remind her. And we had learned about trust, about commitment, about love, real love, the kind that grows stronger through adversity, the kind that survives temptation, the kind that chooses to stay every single day. We'd learned that marriage isn't about excitement or novelty. It's about choosing each other every morning, every evening, every moment in between. It's about building something together, something lasting, something real. Mike retired that year, leaving me as senior partner. At his retirement party, he pulled me aside. You know, he said, that contract was the best thing I ever wrote. I had to agree, not because of its legal brilliance, but because it had saved our marriage. In the most unexpected way, Sarah and I still had our moments of doubt, our disagreements, our challenges, but we faced them together now. No more secrets, no more separate lives, just us, building our future, one day at a time. Looking back, that crazy experiment had been a gift, a painful, terrifying gift, but a gift nonetheless. It had shown us what we really wanted, what we really needed, each other, just each other, forever. As we sat on that porch, watching another sunset, I pulled Sarah closer. Thank you, I whispered. For what? She asked. For choosing us. She smiled, understanding perfectly. Always, she replied. And in that moment, I knew we were going to be okay. Better than okay. We were going to be extraordinary. Together. And